The night seemed ordinary at first. Elena had brought her fiancé, Marcus, to her parents' house for Christmas dinner, a tradition filled with the same old smells of roasted lamb, lemon cleaner, and the faint trace of something always slightly burnt in the kitchen. Her mother hummed holiday songs as if on autopilot, while her father tried awkwardly to chat with Marcus about computers, the kind of conversation that always revealed his disconnect with the younger generation. Her younger sister Nora swirled her wine, dressed in something beige and expensive, looking every bit the favorite child. For Elena, it was the same ritual as every year, smiling politely, pretending she belonged, quietly counting how many minutes would pass before her parents ignored her completely. This time it only took 9. Marcus, calm and observant as always, sat by her side, a grounding presence she desperately needed. After dinner came the inevitable tradition. Elena's mother clapped her hands and announced, "I brought the albums out," as if it were a surprise, and not the carefully rehearsed act it always was. The family gathered, feigning excitement over the same stained pages they had seen countless times. Nora leaned in with curiosity. Her boyfriend wore the mask of polite interest, and Elena braced herself for the nostalgia parade she never quite felt part of. The first albums were harmless enough. Birthday cakes, beach trips, awkward school photos. But then came Elena's album. Marcus grew still. His shoulders tensed as he leaned closer, scanning each picture with the precision of someone spotting flaws in a photograph. His hand slid under the table, gripping Elena's. "Don't you see it?" he whispered, his voice low and urgent. Confused, Elena shook her head. The photos looked normal at first glance. Her in a pink coat, her by a swing set, her at a fountain. But Marcus's intensity unsettled her. He dropped her hand, masking his concern with a polite smile, as her mother narrated stories about pine cones and stray cats. Elena, however, couldn't shake the unease curling in her stomach. Only when they left did Marcus reveal the truth. In the car, he pulled a few photos he had secretly slipped from the pile. One by one he showed her. The same face, the same smile, the same expression repeated across different backgrounds, as though her image had been copy-pasted into memories that weren't real. Elena's breath caught. She realized she had never seen a baby picture of herself. She couldn't recall a single memory before the age of 5. What had always felt like a vague emptiness in her past now loomed like a gaping void. And for the first time, she wondered if her childhood had been built on a lie. The days after Christmas weighed heavily on Elena. She replayed Marcus's words in her mind, the altered photographs, the unease she had carried all her life but never dared to name. It was as though someone had pulled a loose thread, and now her entire past threatened to unravel. For the first time, Elena examined her childhood with suspicion. She realized her parents had never once spoken about grandparents, cousins, or any relatives beyond their own tight household. Nora, her younger sister, had been showered with affection. Special gifts, whispered encouragement, the kind of warmth Elena always longed for but rarely received. Whenever Elena asked about family history, her mother's sharp tone ended the conversation. The war took everything. Don't ask again. Even her missing memories were excused away with the same refrain. Her parents insisted she had been too young to remember, or that trauma had erased the first years of her life. And Elena, wanting to belong, had forced herself to accept those explanations, telling herself she was lucky to have a family at all. But now, the smallest details began to surface like fragments of a half-remembered dream. She recalled being 4, perhaps 5, lying in a room she did not recognize, bathed in the faint glow of a yellow curtain. There was a woman there. Not her mother, not Helen. This woman's face was soft, framed by dark hair, and her hands smelled of oranges. Elena remembered being held against a wool sweater that scratched but comforted her. The woman's voice was gentle, humming a tune Elena still could not place, a melody that made her chest ache with longing. And then came the memory that froze her. She had once called this woman Mama. It wasn't Helen's face that appeared when the word formed in her mouth. It was the kind woman's, smiling as she wiped juice from Elena's chin. But that moment had ended abruptly. She remembered Victor's shadow falling across her, his voice low and threatening. "Never say that again. She is not your mama. Do you understand? The memory blurred after that, smothered under years of silence and fear. Elena pressed her palms to her face, trembling. The cracks in her story were no longer subtle. They were gaping wounds, evidence that her life had not begun in the home she thought was hers. Somewhere, hidden behind the lies of her parents, was another truth. A truth that smelled faintly of citrus and carried the weight of a stolen childhood. Sleep never came that night. Elena lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Marcus's slow breathing beside her, the only anchor keeping her from drifting into madness. Her chest tightened with every inhale, her thoughts circling the photos, the orange-scented memory, the forbidden word, Mama. By dawn, her body betrayed her, shaking hands, shallow breaths, a rising panic she could no longer contain. At 2:47 a.m., she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice cracked as she told the dispatcher, "I think I was abducted. When I was 5. The word sounded absurd, yet frighteningly true. Within minutes, an officer and a social worker were at her apartment. Marcus stood by her side, holding her hand as she repeated her story, fragmented between sobs. She showed them the copied photographs, explained her missing memories, and confessed the chilling recollection of being silenced as a child. The police didn't dismiss her. Instead, they opened a welfare case, explaining it was now a matter of investigation. Elena felt both relief and dread. Relief that someone finally believed her. Dread because it meant her entire life might collapse under the weight of the truth. Days later, her parents appeared unannounced at her apartment. Helen carried a tin of cookies as if she were arriving for a casual visit. Victor lingered by the door, his eyes narrowed, scanning Marcus like an intruder. Elena could barely look at them. The confrontation was inevitable. With trembling hands, she demanded answers. The mask slipped quickly. Helen's smile faltered, and Victor sank into a chair as though carrying a burden too heavy to hide any longer. "You're right," Helen admitted at last, her voice brittle. "You're not our biological child." The world tilted beneath Elena. She gripped the table to steady herself. Victor's tone was sharper, defensive. "We saved you. The war destroyed families. You were abandoned. We gave you a home, a future." But their words only deepened the ache. Saved or stolen? What was the difference if her life had been built on lies? Helen's eyes glossed over as she explained further. They had no photos of Elena as a baby, so they created them, pasting her face into staged memories to erase the gaps. Her birth mother, they insisted, had been too young, too incapable. "You wouldn't have survived with her," Helen whispered, as though pleading for forgiveness. Elena's voice was barely audible. "Who was she?" For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Victor muttered a single name, one that seemed to shatter the air itself. "Mara Petrovich." Elena repeated the name to herself, feeling both foreignness and recognition stir in her chest. It was the first true piece of her past, and it terrified her more than all the lies combined. The name lingered in Elena's mind like a haunting melody, Mara Petrovich. She whispered it in the dark when Marcus was asleep, testing the shape of it on her tongue, hoping it would unlock something buried deep within her memory. Instead, it brought only more questions. Marcus, ever practical, sat beside her at the kitchen table with his laptop. "If she exists, we'll find her," he said. They combed through social media, archives, even Serbian community groups. The name was common enough to yield dozens of results, but after hours of searching, one profile stopped Elena cold. A woman with dark hair streaked silver, her kind eyes radiating warmth through the screen. Her profile picture showed her holding a basket of oranges. Her hands trembled as she clicked message. Days passed before a reply came. When it did, Marcus urged her to set up a video call. The wait for the connection was unbearable. Then the screen flickered, and the woman appeared. Older now, her face weathered by time and grief, yet undeniably the same one from Elena's fragmented memory. "Elena?" The woman whispered, tears welling instantly. Then she shook her head. "No, Milena." The sound of the name sent a jolt through Elena. For years she had been Elena, but hearing Milena felt like being called home after a lifetime away. She broke down, unable to form words as the woman reached out toward the camera as though she could bridge the oceans between them. Mara explained everything. Her daughter, Elena, had been stolen when she was only 5. Mara had left her briefly with a trusted neighbor while running an errand. When she returned, both child and neighbor were gone. The neighbor, it turned out, was connected to trafficking rings that preyed on war-torn families. Mara had reported it to the police, searched hospitals, shelters, even refugee camps, but Elena had vanished without a trace. "I never stopped looking for you," Mara said, holding up a worn folder of missing child flyers. The photo was grainy, but Elena recognized herself instantly. The final blow came when Marcus cross-referenced documents with U.S. immigration records. The timeline matched perfectly. Helen and Victor had taken Elena's stolen identity and fabricated adoption papers. With a child in their care, they qualified for resettlement and permanent residency in America. Elena felt sick. Every Christmas, every birthday, every forced family photograph, all of it was a mask for the crime that had uprooted her life. The people she had called her parents weren't rescuers. They were abductors. But across the screen, Mara's face glowed with both sorrow and hope. For the first time in decades, she had found her daughter, and for Elena, it was the first glimpse of the truth she had been denied her entire life. The reunion was not a dream, though it felt like one. When Elena stepped off the plane in Belgrade, Mara was waiting with trembling hands pressed against her mouth, tears streaming freely. They clung to each other at the airport, the kind of embrace that seemed to fuse decades of separation into one moment of recognition. For the first time in her life, Elena felt the word mama fit without hesitation. Days later, she stood beside Mara in front of local authorities, holding the yellowed missing child flyer. The officials examined the documents, compared them with Elena's U.S. records, and opened an international investigation. Soon the truth was undeniable. Abduction, falsified identities, immigration fraud. What Elena had feared was real. Her entire childhood had been a crime hidden behind carefully constructed lies. Back in the U.S., the consequences unfolded swiftly. Federal agencies moved in on Helen and Victor. Their naturalization papers were revoked, their fraud exposed in court. Stripped of their citizenship, they were deported, returning not as heroes of survival, but as criminals who had built their lives on deception. For Nora, the fallout was different. Though she had grown up as Elena's sister, she now learned she shared no blood with her at all. At first she was devastated, angry at her parents, ashamed of the family name. But unlike Helen and Victor, Nora still had a chance to rebuild. She remained in the U.S. legally, her future intact, and cautiously began repairing her fractured bond with Elena. Elena, however, found herself torn between rage and sorrow. Part of her mourned the years stolen, the childhood erased, the trust shattered. But standing beside Mara, hearing her real name spoken with love, she knew one truth mattered above all. She was no longer lost. Justice had been served, and though scars would remain, her stolen story was finally being written back into her hands. Months after the truth unraveled, a new chapter began. Through the family reunification program, Mara was granted entry into the United States. Elena met her at the airport this time, waiting with flowers and an embrace that carried none of the fear of their first reunion. Mara, once a distant figure blurred by memory, now walked beside her daughter in the streets of a country that had once hidden her. Mara found steady work in a small bakery run by fellow immigrants, her hands once again busy with flour and fruit, the scent of oranges filling her apron pockets. At night, she and Elena sat together, piecing through old photographs and documents, weaving fragments of the past into a tapestry of belonging. For Elena, freedom came not only from justice served, but from reclaiming her name, her history, and her future. No longer chained by the lies Helen and Victor had spun, she embraced her true self with a quiet strength. Marcus stood unwavering by her side, their bond deepened by the trials they had endured together. As they planned their wedding, Elena insisted Mara be at the center of it, her real mother, her anchor, her witness to the life she had reclaimed. Meanwhile, far away, Helen and Victor's world crumbled. Stripped of their stolen life, deported to a homeland they had abandoned, they became shadows of the people they once pretended to be. Their home in America was gone, their reputation destroyed, their family fractured beyond repair. But Milena no longer looked back. Surrounded by Marcus and Nora, now slowly mending their sisterly bond, and Mara, she stepped forward into a future built on truth. Her stolen childhood could never be returned, but her stolen identity had been restored, and as she walked down the aisle months later, Mara's proud tears glistening in the front row, Milena knew she had finally reclaimed the life that was always meant to be hers.